Hey everyone, Teo1904 here, and in this video I want to cover the Trampleslide Druid. This build is very fun and involves around three key items. The Trampled Earth aspect that allows you to use Trample, and then a wave of landslides is following you around. Then the Aftershock, which doubles this effect. You saw right there that when you are casting Trample, it's like one wave, and then when it stops, another wave is being casted. It just follows up the first round here. And secondly, we are using the Symbiotic aspect to reset our cooldowns as much as possible. Use Symbiotic, we obviously need to use the Nature's Fury key passive, and we are using a very interesting way of triggering this. We are actually using the Great Staff of the Crown to turn our claw skills into storm skills, and in addition it will also cast Storm Strike. This means that instead of only having a 20% chance to reset our cooldowns, we actually have a 40% chance to reset the cooldown of Trample, making this build feel much smoother than when you're trying to do the same thing with, for example, simply using Storm Strike by itself. Alright, let's have a look at the itemization of this build. So, first of all, we are using the Great Staff of the Crown. I already mentioned this. This is amazing to increase our chances from 20 to 40% to reset our cooldowns of Trample. This is massively quality of life, and I felt horrible when I was not using this in comparison, so I can only recommend. Obviously, this is a unique item, so it is very difficult to come by a version that is actually really good, such as this like 790 item power baseline here. If you don't have this item, you are simply using the Trampled Earth aspect on his staff to increase that damage that you're dealing with all the landslides that are being put out. Alright, next up is the Trampled Earth Amulet. Here we want to increase the damage that we get from this aspect as much as possible, therefore we're putting it onto your amulet. Unless we don't have access to the Great Staff of Krone, in which case we are just putting it onto our two-handed staff weapon. Next aspect to look at is the Symbiotic aspect. I would love to have this on my helmet instead of the gloves right now, because that would allow us to increase our damage much further by adding another offensive aspect, but I unfortunately ran out of those aspects while testing this build. However, this allows us to reset or reduce the cooldowns of non-ultimate skills when Nature's Fury is triggered. So let's look at this keystone really quick. Whenever we are casting an Earth or a Storm skill, the vice versa is being reduced. So when I use a Storm skill, then we are reducing the cooldown of Earth skills. In combination with the Great Staff of the Crown, this allows us to have a massive cooldown reduction on Trample, allowing us to very frequently use this attack. So instead of Symbiotic onto your gloves, which I mentioned should be on your helmet, you actually want to use the aspect of Natural Balance on your gloves to increase your critical strike damage when using an Earth skill after you have been using a Storm skill. And as we are constantly using Storm skills to reset our cooldowns, this is basically permanently up whenever we are using Trample or Trampleslide. And vice versa, we're also slightly increasing the damage output of our Storm skills after we have been using Trampleslide, but that is not really that important. Another alternative to the Natural Balance aspect is the Edgemasters aspect here. We are constantly at maximum resources because we are only using Landslide actively when we are facing single target monsters. And finally, for the offensive aspects, we are using Retaliation. We are creating a lot of barrier through, first of all, our Urban Bulwark. Then we are using Trample, which also creates Fortify. So we have a couple of great ways to increase our damage through this aspect as well. Next up, let's look at our defensive/utility options. For our boots, we're using Ghostwalker. We're basically permanently using either Unstoppable through Trample or through Earthen Bulwark, which allows us to have this buff up most of the time. Then we are using Mending Stone on our pants. This is our only real defensive aspect that we are using to increase the duration of Earthen Bulwark, which we are constantly refreshing anyways, but this is a nice quality of life to have Ghostwalker up as much as possible, and to also be unstoppable whenever we are using Claw to reset our cooldowns. So having a big uptime on this is very, very important. Then we have the ballistic aspect. This is to increase our damage a little bit further by adding 2 ranks to our landslide. Instead of this, you can also go for a defensive option, which would be the aspect of might. We are constantly using Claw to reset our cooldowns, which means we are using basic skills constantly, so granting us another 20% damage reduction is a great win here. Before we dive into the skill tree, I want to go through some minor questions regarding what are the priorities and stats. It's very important that we are getting cooldown reduction here on the amulet, and the same goes for cooldown reduction on the helmet. I really love having the basic skill attack here as well. This allows us to just simply attack with Claw faster for hopefully more procs of the symbiotic aspect. And we're also looking to have Poison Creeper on the helmet, just to have that instead of using a skill point on the skill tree. Like, we want to have Poison Creeper, but ideally we want to not have a committed skill point for that. And apart from that, as the usual suspects, you want to have damage reduction against close and ranged, and you want to get like all the damage reduction that you can on the build. Some life is nice, some armor is nice. You don't want to shoehorn yourself towards a werewolf or the werebear form, so try to avoid these total armor while in a certain form aspects. And what we really do not care about here in this build is spirit cost reduction. While it is nice to have it sometimes to use landslide against single targets, I don't really feel like it's absolutely necessary. And then for offensive stuff, well, we are really shoehorned here with the Staff of Crown, so we don't really have any options on there. But we want to have critical strike damage, critical strike chance, physical damage, etc., to increase our damage output with Earth skills especially, so make sure to focus on that. And attack speed on your gloves. Really, really nice to have. While we are looking at the symbiotic aspect here as well, you want to reach the 8 seconds cooldown reduction here, so make sure to always have that. Alright, let's hop into the skill tree of this build, and we are really, really starved for skill points. And while I was playing this build, this is the skill tree that felt best to me. So we are going into Claw with the increased attack speed and the Wild Claw to increase our chance to proc Symbiotic. And then we are using Storm Strike, 1 point into Enhanced Storm Strike. This is very important for the Landslides upgrade with the Terror modes. Gonna get into that in a second. And the Fierce Storm Strike to increase our damage against single targets, where we can simply get some vulnerable procs on there. Then we are using Landslide. This is our priority damage skill, but we're actually not actively using it very often, apart from single target scenarios. This is how we are scaling our damage. So we have to max this out, obviously. We use Enhanced Landslide and then Primal Landslide. And as I mentioned, we have this Terror mode effect here, where Immobilize and Stunning increases your stacks of Terror mode. And when you then use Landslide, it will guaranteed crit, and it will increase its critical strike damage by 40%. So we have 2 ways now to create these Terror modes. First off is Storm Strike. By using the Staff of the Crown, we are passively also using this, so we are having a 15% chance to immobilize a monster, or rather every monster that we are hitting, with the Storm Strike effect. And we also have Poison Creeper, which immobilizes them on a cooldown. And of course, we also have Enhanced Landslide, which also immobilizes monsters. So we have 3 ways in total. Then we go into the passives here. We have Heart of the Wild, 1 point. This is just to travel to the Wild Impulses passive that increases our damage for Landslide. And we are using Predatory Instinct. We are pretty much always in close range because we are either clawing away at monsters or we are using our Trampleslide to jump into the monsters. We're like running into the monsters, and this means we are having a higher crit chance. Then we are using Earthen Bulwark. I already mentioned this. This is for our Unstoppable effect from the Enhanced Bulwark rune. And we are also increasing our Fortify uptime, or generation, I should say, with the Preserving Earthen Bulwark upgrade. Then we are using Debilitating Roar with Enhanced Debilitating Roar and Preserving Debilitating Roar to get some healing and another Fortify effect, and most importantly, some massive damage reduction whenever you need it. Then we have Poison Creeper. I mentioned this already. You really want this to be on your helmet just to save this skill point. This is also used to create some Terra modes, so this is the priority thing. But we also have some other effects on the Paragon board, which we are triggering through this. Namely, we are increasing our damage by 45% when there's 3 monsters that are poisoned in our range. So this is a very, very great damage increase as well. Alright, next up, well, we are using Trample. Obviously, we don't actually need to level this up any further because, well, we're not actually using this for damage. We are using it to proc the damage with the landslides through Trampled Earth. So we are just putting 1 point into here. The enhancement doesn't really make a whole lot of a difference, but Natural Trample grants us another way of fortification. Then we are also using Crushing Earth. We are knocking back, immobilizing a lot of monsters, so this is a very critical effect on dealing increased damage. And we have Stone Guard to even further increase our damage as long as we are above 50%. Fortify, which are basically constantly. And we are going into Neurotoxin and Toxic Claws. This is just while we are using Claw to also poison monsters. This is again to trigger the Heightened Malice legendary node here. And we're using Envenom to increase our damage against poisoned monsters, especially our critical strike damage, I should say. And in the combination with Poison Creeper, that's just a massive damage boost. And down here we are using Defiance. We are using a nature skill, which is Landslide as our main damage, so this is just an increase in damage. Using vulnerable damage here to increase our damage even further. We have the Exploit glyph in our Paragon board, plus we have the Storm Strike effect. And then we are using Resonance. In this case, we are actually triggering both effects, so we get up to, what is it, 18% damage to Earth skills when the previous cast was a Storm skill, and vice versa. And since we are always casting a Storm skill before we're using Trample, this should always affect our damage. Next up is Defensive Posture, just another way to increase our Fortify effect. We use 1 point into Quick Shift. We played around whether or not this works with the Landslide damage increase, but it straight up doesn't. Only because you are using a Bear skill or Shapeshifting skill to proc the Landslide, it doesn't increase the damage of them. But what does increase is the heightened senses here. We are constantly shifting between werewolf and bear form, which allows us to have a much more damage reduction here against elites. And then we are putting 1 point into Natural Fortitude. Again, we are constantly switching between forms, and this makes the Fortify effect very, very frequent. And finally, we are using Nature's Fury. This is basically the core of the build. Without this key passive, this build wouldn't be working, so that's a just obvious choice. And now the final point of this video is going to be the Paragon board. This, as per usual, looks a little bit more overwhelming than it probably is, but this is my level 100 Paragon board that you should aim for. So in the starter board, we are going towards the right side. We are picking up the glyph socket, and we actually place the spirit glyph here. And we obviously pick up all the dexterity nodes that we can. We also put in a resolve as a 1 pointer for more resistances. Not super necessary, but yeah, it's just a nice boost. Then we go into the heightened malice board. We have to turn it so the glyph socket is in the bottom left. We're traveling through the blue, the magic nodes and the rare nodes here, and we're picking up the glyph and putting in Fang and Claw. This allows us to just increase our damage while in Werebear or in Werewolf form towards close enemies, and again we are pretty much always in close proximity. When we are using the left exit, we're actually not going for heightened malice right away. We are attaching the survival instincts board, where we are placing the glyph as close to the entrance as possible, and then we are just picking up bulwark up here, go into survival instincts, and on the glyph socket we are putting undaunted. Again, we are pretty much always fortified, so this is a nice little damage increase and defensive increase. Then we are taking the left exit here again. We are putting in the Earthen Devastation board here, and we are picking up the glyph where we place the Werebear glyph to increase our damage even further. We are going back to the Survival Instincts board where we are going towards the top exit, and we are picking up the glyph from the Constricting Tendrils board here, where we are placing the exploit glyph. We're picking up all the dexterity nodes. We're actually placing both of these rare nodes as well to fill up some damage and life. Well, this is for the dexterity nodes mostly. And then we are actually picking up Constricting Tendrils through Devastation. This is actually a little bit of a coin toss, I think. I think you can remove these points as well and place them instead into Earthen Devastation. I'm not sure what 100% is the best option here. This down here allows you to also pick up Oppress. Probably a coin toss what really is better here. But this also increases the amount of immobilizing. So when you are hitting something with nature magic skills, you are immobilizing more monsters. This should be good on density, maybe not so much on single target. It's a little bit of a coin toss. Then we are going into the Ancestral Guidance board. We don't care about any spirit costs, as we are not using any spirit. So we're just using this as a transitional board to pick up the glyph, put in Earthen's Guide for the nature damage, magic damage increase, and we're also putting up all the magic nodes, minus that intelligence node up there, to make as much use out of this glyph as possible. And then we are going back down through the top entrance of the Heightened Malice board to pick up Heightened Malice, which is a drastic damage increase when there's enough poison monsters around you. Yeah, that's it for this Paragon board. And the final thing I want to show you guys is like how does this build actually look in action. I'm just gonna start at Blind Boros here. This is just a regular dungeon. At the end of the video I will give you a level 50 Nightmare Dungeon playthrough. So the way we're playing this build is we are using our trample, and then we are just left clicking until the cooldown resets. In this case we were fairly unlucky, but this is basically the gameplay rotation. And whenever you are feeling you need some additional damage, you use a Poison Creeper, and you just throw in your Landslide or Trampleslide. And this repeats all the way until you are completing the dungeon. Sometimes when you're getting into crowd control situations, you obviously want to use your Earthen Bulwark to catch some damage and continue blasting basically. In this situation here, for example, I have this boss. I just use my trample. This unfortunately now knocked him back a little bit. Now I want to increase my damage. I will just throw him back a little bit, and boom, he also goes down relatively quickly. And then we'll just clean up here as well. So that's basically your skill rotation, how to actually perform with this build. You can see like I'm constantly switching between the forms, increasing my damage and increasing my survivability. So this is what I have come up with for this build. I hope you enjoyed it, and have fun with a tier Nightmare Dungeon level 50 playthrough. that will follow up, and I will hopefully see you guys in the next video. I have had a lot of fun and frustrations while playing and testing this build, so I hope you enjoy this final result, even though it features a unique item that you first have to find to make this feel really, really comfortable.
I'm not ready yet.